Hello and welcome. This is Elias, a volunteer reader for Audible Local Ledger, bringing you news from the New Bedford Light this Tuesday, April 21st. We begin with a headline that reads, New Bedford commuter train ensnared in delays, cancellations. The arrival of the rail to South Coast was widely celebrated last month, but since opening day, its first weeks have been marked with delays and canceled trains. This past holiday weekend, with the 250th anniversary celebration of the American Revolution and the Boston Marathon, 10 trips on the Fall River and New Bedford lines, 5 inbound and 5 outbound, were replaced with bus service. And earlier this month, WJAR reported people were left stranded in Boston for 5 hours of direct service to the South Coast were canceled due to staff shortages. State Representative Carol Fiola, who represents Fall River, said she met with MBTA General Manager Philip Eng late last week to discuss the delays and disruptions to service. To maintain reliability for riders and ensure adequate staffing levels, some trains were replaced with bus service, per a statement from the MBTA. If additional staff became available, the trips would return to train service and riders would be notified, the T said. Amid these snafus, the MBTA announced it is extending its fare-free weekend service through the end of May as a show of gratitude. The free service was initially set to end next week. We understand how these changes impact our riders, who deserve an appropriate level of service, and we want to express our appreciation for their continued support of transit by extending the fare-free weekend travel on this new line through the end of May, Eng said in a statement. We are in constant communication with Keolis as they work to address this matter for the long term. According to MBTA, Keolis, the contractor that runs the agency's commuter rail network, is training additional crews to support the service on the new line. Currently, if a crew member calls out sick or misses their shift, trains may be canceled if a qualified person is not available to replace them. Keolis is working to increase the number of qualified conductors within the South Coast Rail region, with a plan to reach 65 conductors by early June to increase rail reliability, per the MBTA. Keolis spokesperson Jake O'Neill on Monday said, each train on the Fall River and New Bedford line requires one locomotive engineer and one conductor, but did not answer a question on how many qualified conductors Keolis has as of this month. Keolis is continuing to qualify more train crews on the Fall River and New Bedford line, O'Neill said by email. On job posting sites, Keolis listed openings for conductors, engineers, and roadmasters who manage and oversee track maintenance and operations over the last few weeks. We turn next to community news, this out of Fairhaven. The headline reads, Hundreds Rally in Fairhaven. This is what democracy looks like. Fairhaven. At the intersection of Main Street and Route 6, just steps from Fairhaven High School, about 400 people gathered on Saturday, April 19th, to voice growing concern over what they describe as the slow dismantling of American democracy. The protest was organized by the Fairhaven Democratic Town Committee and was part of a coordinated National Day of Action led by 5051, a decentralized activist network whose name stands for 50 Protests, 50 States, One Day. The group has become a visible presence at rallies across the country, including previous events like Not My President's Day and the global Hands Off demonstrations. Our goal is to mobilize Americans of all parties, of all faiths, of all genders to combat the coup that we are under, said Nancy Becker, a volunteer with the Mass 5051 movement. The turnout has been pretty amazing, said Ann Richard, chair of the Fairhaven Democratic Town Committee. I am so proud. This is what democracy looks like. Protesters came from across the South Coast and beyond, holding signs, chanting, and lining the roadside as cars passed. Some honked in support. A few waved Trump flags. Others pulled over to read signs held along the curb, including one that read, "Now you've pissed off Grandma." Donna Gagnon, who carried that sign, said she was there for her two granddaughters. "I was protesting back in the 70s for women's rights on reproductive health. Now I'm doing it again for my granddaughters." Lynn Israelson Mason, dressed in a handmade fox costume with an orange painted face, said the idea for her outfit came to her earlier in the week after she saw a hungry fox crossing the road just outside of Fairhaven. The image stuck with her. "It's like a fox has raided the hen house," she said, drawing a pointed parallel to President Donald Trump in the White House. But who's watching the fox? Other protesters brought a touch of satire. Mike Powell of Wareham walked with a plush penguin strapped to his back in a child carrier. "It's because of the taxes that were imposed on the island that has only penguins on it," he said. Then, more serious, "We really feel we are at risk of losing our democracy, of losing our country." Saturday's event followed earlier protests in the area. On April 5th, dozens of South Coast residents boarded a morning commuter train from New Bedford to Boston Common, while hundreds more gathered near the Dartmouth Mall, part of the nationwide Hands Off mobilization. A blog called We the People Dissent, run by activist and author Kay Starling, has been tracking protest activity across the country. According to its data, more than 50 demonstrations took place in Massachusetts alone on Saturday. Jody Church, a retired schoolteacher from Rochester, stood by the roadside holding a poster from the 1973 film Hitler, The Last 10 Days. Her choice of prompt was deliberate. "I don't want my grandchildren to go through what my grandparents went through," she said. Tapping her chest, she spoke about the United States as a diverse nation, one that stands for freedom and must remain committed to it. The Constitution of America is not something you can mess with. From the New Bedford Light's Community Voices section, an essay by Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey. She writes, "As Massachusetts marks the 250th anniversary of America's independence, we remember that it all began here, from the iconic sites of Lexington and Concord, where the first shots of the American Revolution rang out, to Boston, where defiance brewed in the harbor. While these places are sacred chapters in our shared American story, the Revolution stretched far beyond battlefields and harbors. It unfolded in the towns and cities that powered Massachusetts and propelled us toward progress. To understand the grit, labor, and spirit of reinvention that marked the American Revolution, and the legacy of innovation and progress that defines our state, we must also turn our eyes south to the port towns and industrial cities of Fall River, New Bedford, and Taunton. Southeastern Massachusetts is a region whose revolutionary identity is embedded in every wharf, mill, and main street. In 1774, a full year before the shots at Lexington and Concord, Taunton raised what may have been the first American flag to boldly reject British rule, an early declaration of independence flown from the town green bearing the word liberty. That moment was more than symbolic. It was a declaration that the people would chart the course of our nation. New Bedford's story is one steeped in revolutionary spirit. Once the whaling capital of the world, the whale oil from New Bedford ships fueled the literal and metaphorical fires of the 19th century. The city was also a hub of abolitionist activity and a haven for freedom seekers on the Underground Railroad. Frederick Douglass, having escaped slavery, found a community in New Bedford that recognized his voice and his value. It was from here that Douglass launched his career as an anti-slavery lecturer and inspired generations of Americans to advocate for freedom and equality for all. This May, Fall River will bring to life the region's legacy of revolution with the Battle of Fall River Reenactment Weekend, commemorating Colonel Joseph Durfee and his 16 militiamen's 1778 resistance against British troops near today's Anawan and Pocasset streets. Outnumbered and outgunned, These patriots stood their ground, defending their village against the advance of the British. This skirmish, now remembered as the Battle of Fall River, stands as a testament to local courage and resilience. That spirit carried forward into another kind of revolution, an industrial one shaped by the inspiring stories of the immigrant community. French Canadians, Portuguese, Irish, Cape Verdeans, and many others helped transform the city of Seven Hills into a manufacturing powerhouse. These cities have contributed to a distinctly American story, and the future here is vibrant. Southeastern Massachusetts is home to clean energy innovation, marine science research, and a cultural renaissance that honors the past while welcoming new voices. New Bedford's creative economy is thriving. Fall River's waterfront is being reimagined, and Taunton remains a place where civic pride fuels progress. As we commemorate our state's key 250th milestones, we are certain to celebrate the flags raised and the ports defended. But this special anniversary will also celebrate the classrooms, art studios, research labs, and neighborhoods that are shaping Massachusetts' next revolution, one of inclusion, sustainability, resilience, and always liberty. The words of Governor Maura Healey. Turning now to news from the State House, a headline that asks, will a bill to protect students from sex abuse by school staff finally pass this year? In 2015, Senator Joan Lovely set out to correct a problem, sex abuse of teens in schools. A decade later, she is still trying to criminalize sexual misconduct by school staff with students who are 16 or 17 years old. Today, Massachusetts lags behind 39 other states where laws specifically make it illegal for school employees or anyone in positions of authority in schools to sexually abuse teens. A New Bedford family has gone to federal court alleging their teenage son's school failed to protect him from abuse. And with new momentum, lawmakers and advocates hope Lovely's bill, which would change the age of consent for sexual contact between students and school employees, will pass the legislature this season. On April 4th, Jacob Pothier's family filed a lawsuit in federal court alleging that the Greater New Bedford Regional Vocational Technical High School and its administrators failed to protect their son from an inappropriate sexual relationship with an employee. Pothier died in a car crash in January 2024, just after his 18th birthday. Kathleen Martins, a former security officer at the school, was also in the car, sustaining serious injuries. Pothier had been in a relationship with Martins, which Pothier's family said began while she was an employee at the school and Pothier was a student. In the complaint, Pothier's family alleged Martins sexually groomed their son. This type of grooming is all too common, according to Jetta Bernier, the executive director of Enough Abuse, who helped Lovely draft her legislation. In Massachusetts, individuals can consent to sexual activity once they're 16 years old. Bernier said that abusive school personnel often groom a child for years so they can begin a sexual relationship once the child turns 16. The pain and heartbreak endured by the Pothier family is inexcusable and must not be allowed to persist, New Bedford Senator Mark Montigny wrote in a statement to The Light. Montigny is co-sponsoring Lovely's bill in the Senate and said he previously drafted legislation to close the same consent loophole. Beacon Hill should have prohibited this conduct many years ago, Montigny wrote in the statement. There's simply no excuse for the legislative inaction, and these bills should pass as soon as possible. Pothier's aunt, Jennifer Cullen, remembers her nephew Jacob as an awesome kid, a great athlete, and a stubborn boy who loved family time. He and I are super fighters, Cullen said. She said that even though he was a middle child of 6, Jacob was a fierce protector of his siblings. I would never thought he was at risk. Since her nephew's death, Cullen has been advocating for a change in the law. She says she wants to make sure no one else goes through the most horrific thing I've been through in my life. She would like to see a more comprehensive version of Lovely's bill pass. Cullen thinks the bill should also protect high school students over age 18, such as those with disabilities. Those vulnerable young adults are not going to be subject to that law, but they're still in a school, Cullen said. They're still under the jurisdiction of people. Lovely's office confirmed to the Light her bill would apply to a security officer like the one allegedly involved with Pothier because they are in a position of trust, authority, or supervision over a child. Lovely, a Democrat representing Salem, has been fighting to eliminate what she calls a loophole for years now. Her bill, titled, quote, "An Act Relative to Sexual Assaults by Adults in Positions of Authority or Trust," unquote, would raise the age of consent for sexual contact between school employees and students to 18. Montigny, a Democrat, is the prime co-sponsor of the bill. The bill would allow judges to impose a jail or prison sentence on school employees for having sex with a student who is 16 or 17. Lovely, a survivor of child sexual abuse, said she never ran for office on this issue. "It wasn't until I got here that I was able to find my voice, to be able to really work at this, really peel it back and see how prevalent it is," Lovely said. "I just want to prevent it from happening to others. It's just that simple." At an April State House briefing on preventing child sex abuse, speakers repeatedly quipped that Massachusetts likes to be first in education, health care, and energy efficiency. But in preventing child sex abuse, they said, Massachusetts lags far behind. Without laws to do this, advocates say, Massachusetts law protects adults who use their authority to sexually abuse students. Lovely and others have filed various bills on the subject since 2015. Bills often die unnoticed and without explanation in the Massachusetts legislature. In 2021, Massachusetts passed just 0.41% of the bills it introduced, which made it the least effective state, according to a 2021 study. Transparency advocates say bills often die in committee on an unclear timeline with no public information on who is blocking them. Representative Lee Davis, Democrat representing Great Barrington, represents Berkshire County, where multiple former students have accused a teacher at the local Miss Hall's school of sexual abuse, exploitation, and grooming. Davis, a freshman representative, single parent to 3 children and a former educator, said she often heard about the high-profile case from constituents on the campaign trail. She spoke with Berkshire County District Attorney Timothy Shugru, who she said expressed frustration at not being able to pursue charges in the Miss Hall's case. She approached Lovely about sponsoring a companion bill in the House less than 2 weeks after winning her general election. "I made a promise to myself that if I were to be elected, that's the first thing I would do. Research into how I can help push this bill along," Davis said. Knowing the struggles that Senator Lovely has faced in the legislature, I felt that as a freshman and someone that really has an interest in this case, and also as someone that lives in Berkshire County, I felt that I had to do what I could. Both the House and Senate versions of the bill are assigned to the legislature's Committee on the Judiciary. In the previous 2 sessions, Lovely's bill had its hearing in the same committee, heard testimony, and then stalled. Lovely said she hasn't heard any opposition to the bill. Lovely said sexual abuse in children is extremely prevalent. Nationally, 20% of all children will experience at least one episode of sex abuse or victimization, but people don't want to talk about it. They shut down, Lovely said, and she said this is part of the problem. People are extremely uncomfortable talking about it, thinking that it ever happened in their world, Lovely said. They don't know anybody who that has happened to, where it's pretty prevalent, and especially in children, because children don't talk. They don't reveal it. And if they do, if it does come out, then the children feel like they did something wrong. New Bedford's representatives have mixed opinions on the bill. Notably, the city's Democratic Representative Christopher Markey opposes the bill because he said it is inconsistent. Markey said that the age of consent law assumes 16-year-olds are mature enough to make a decision, and that any law that negates that decision is inconsistent with the assumption and that law. Markey said sex abuse in schools would be better managed by the schools themselves, who should screen the people they hire and punish relationships with students. This, according to Bernier, isn't as easy as it sounds. She has reviewed the policies on sex abuse in Massachusetts schools and found some to be wholly insufficient. Some lack specificity, simply asking that professionals conduct themselves in a, quote, appropriate manner, unquote, and others have no education on what is considered sex abuse and harassment in these cases. It's not enough for us to wait for these cases to happen and then punish the people who did it, Bernier said. If we wait until these cases are identified because the abuse has gone on, we have failed these children. New Bedford's Representative Christopher Hendricks, who served on the Judiciary Committee in the last session, says concerns about consistency are a major obstacle to the bill. Despite his concerns about consistency, Hendricks said he'll probably co-sponsor the bill. He also said he would support raising the statewide age of consent to 18 to close the loophole. But, Davis said, raising the age of consent to 18 would be extremely difficult. We're not trying to make it that youth cannot have sex. We're trying to protect them, Davis said. Representative Antonio Cabral said in a statement to The Light that he supports the bill and legislation that would close the consent loophole. Davis's fellow freshman reps in New Bedford, Democrats Mark Sylvia and Stephen Willett, also said they support the bill. Whatever inconsistencies there may be in law, I'm confident that those issues can be addressed, so I don't think that there should be a barrier to putting in place important protections, Sylvia said. We have a lot of talent to resolve issues of law because the underlying issue is protecting young people. Cullen, Pothier's aunt, is advocating for a change in the law. She said she's run into roadblocks trying to get meetings with legislators, even when she went to the State House in person. Cullen, who lives in Plymouth County, said it's hard to get a meeting with a legislator who isn't her representative. If you're really sponsoring a bill that impacts the entire state, you should be willing to speak to anybody, Cullen said. For Cullen, protecting children like Jacob has become her life's calling. The next step for me is change in the Commonwealth, and I won't stop until it happens, Cullen said. I don't care if it takes me the rest of my life. It'll be my aim. Turning once again to the New Bedford Lights Community Voices, we hear a piece authored by Superintendent O'Leary, Superintendent of New Bedford Public Schools. He writes, students and families in New Bedford have a right to an equitable education. However, assuring these rights requires constantly confronting direct and indirect barriers to inclusion and equity. On March 28th, when we received a notification that previously approved COVID relief projects were in jeopardy, I was stunned but not completely surprised. We have repeatedly noted that comprehensive urban districts remain overlooked in capital funding and policy. That has never held us back, however. We have increased facility spending more than any other district in Massachusetts and maximized all available opportunities to combine, multiply, and match credits, repair programs, loan orders, and state and federal grants. We are now approaching a decade of record investments in our buildings. As is our track record, within 24 hours of the U.S. Department of Education's clawback announcement, New Bedford's facility, finance, and capital planning team developed plans to manage any disruption and communicated with our state partners to maintain progress on our existing projects. Massachusetts is pushing back. On April 16th, I sat next to Massachusetts Education Secretary Patrick Tutwiler when he told me at Superintendent Roundtable, "We have your back." We're very encouraged by the actions taken by Massachusetts and more than a dozen other states to file suit and reverse the unlawful directives issued by Secretary McMahon. As the lawsuit states, the Secretary's recklessness sees Substantial confusion spread through districts, and the resulting policy uncertainty stands to cause immediate and devastating harm to vulnerable students and families. These directives not only undermine long-standing student protections, but also threaten the core purpose of ESSER, supports that help students recover from the lost instructional time in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Unique among the region's grantees, New Bedford's COVID relief investment program in non-recurring projects avoids a fiscal cliff and ensures all city students will see recurring benefits well into the future. While COVID relief funding is well understood as one-time funding, its impact can and should be long-lasting. That's what recovery means. Projects like the Central Kitchen and School-Based Health Center will elevate health and nutrition for all city students, including those attending non-district schools, for decades to come. Meanwhile, targeted space renovations at Brooks and Hathaway will extend the useful life of these buildings, adding to multi-million-dollar projects and saving city residents millions against future obligations. The HVAC project at Gomes, like the project completed at Pulaski, will increase the number of students served in climate-controlled environments. It remains striking that New Bedford is without a school-based health center, a gap that echoes through our absenteeism, homelessness, and student wellness data. Secretary McMahon should note that her home state of Connecticut has made student wellness a clear priority, demonstrating by its expansive network of student health centers, a model strongly underwritten by federal support. This essay is unfortunately too long for full inclusion, but we jump to the end of the superintendent's remarks when he writes, "Our expertise as educators means we cannot dodge nor doge our way past our responsibilities. New Bedford's facility work and financial management is a model of innovation and efficiency. In contrast, recent directives from the U.S. Department of Education not only undermine long-standing student protections, but also threaten to dismantle supports that help students recover from lost instructional time in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I noted several years ago, our students should not have to compromise because of where they live, and our staff should not have to compromise because of where they work." The words of Andrew O'Leary, Superintendent of New Bedford Schools. That's all we have time for this Tuesday, April 22nd. This is Elias wishing you a good day.